again from next Monday as part of an easing of COVID rules. The government has told rail bosses to come up with a plan to minimise disruption after some trains were pulled out of service due to cracks. The weather breezy with sunshine and showers, a high of 17 degrees.
LBC Travel, I'm Joanne Webb. The severe disruption on the trains continue because of the safety checks. Great Western Railway aren't running their high-speed services to and from Paddington, although local services are able to run this morning. And London North Eastern Railway only running a handful of services to and from King's Cross. On the Underground, there are severe delays on the Jubilee line, and on the roads, one lane is closed on the M25 clockwise just after junction 29 at the A127. It's because of those emergency repair works. And in Edmonton, the Hertford Road is closed in both directions because of an unsafe building.
This is LBC. Ferrari now. 0345 6060 973. LBC.
You can always
Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
9 minutes before 8 is the time. Couple of emails on the situation of the Labour Party. Nice one here from Graham in Bushy. Starmer has said the Labour HQ needs to move outside of London. Maybe it will go to where their care support is in Tuscany. That's quite a good one, isn't it? Same subject here. Or Joe Hill-Ryan says, Starmer has got to go. His leadership has failed as a blue Labour experiment. Time to give leadership back to the adults in the room. Like John McDonnell or Clive Lewis. OK, cracks in the Labour Party, cracks though with our trains, and possibly another week of chaos on some of them. Over 100, nearly 200 trains were taken out of service, actually, on part of the weekend. Details now. Joanne Webb, LBC's travel editor from the LBC Travel Desk. Joanne.
Yes, Nick, that's right. So it was nearly 200 trains that had to be taken out of service over the weekend. Now, this mainly affects Great Western Railway as their high-speed trains use those trains that are affected. So that's services to and from Paddington. Now, they've told me this morning some of their local services are able to run, but if you need to get from the West Country to London, you're going to have to change trains quite a few times. So depending on where you're coming from, you're going to have to use much slower trains and get off the train and get onto another one. It's also affecting London North Eastern Railway as well. Now, they can only run a handful of trains to and from King's Cross and also across their network. Some of their networks had to be suspended as a result. Now, I have been told the trains are being checked, and if they're fine, they can go back into service. But obviously, if they're not, they're having to be fixed. And I have been warned it could be the case all the way through this week.
Joanne Webb, thank you. Joanne Webb reporting. Just to give a little bit of geographical details, engineers were checking carriages at depots near London and Bristol last night. As Joanne said, Great Western Railway runs trains to South West England and South Wales, London and North Eastern Railways. It appears, I hasten to add, that this is a precautionary measures. These cracks are actually measuring mere millimetres, are believed to be on the mechanism used to jack up carriages when they're being fixed. So although obviously there's no immediate danger, they quite rightly cannot be allowing trains to go clattering in and out of stations when they could have cracks in that key part of the carriage system. So we'll get you more details on that as and when we can. Let's move away from the Labour Party and talk about events in Israel. It is, of course, an important day. Some would argue rather an inflammatory day. Natasha in Kensington, you're on the radio. Natasha, good morning.
Good morning, Nick.
Yes, what do you want to tell me?
Well, the report you had from Jerusalem, unfortunately, only put a very twisted part of what Jerusalem Day looks like in Jerusalem.
Right.
For the vast majority of these marches, they are young teenagers. Of course, there are some elements that have, in the past, caused tension and conflict, but the report as a whole left out hugely important parts of the context, which is that the month of Ramadan, desperately unfortunately, is the cause of a great deal of tension every year. And it is
why? Which is about to come to an end, of course, isn't it, on Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe? Why?
And it's at the end of the month, unfortunately, that matters come to a head. There are elements of the Palestinian leadership that use this month in order to stoke up tension and feeling, and especially the events that we have been seeing.
You don't think that a flag, and I'm not defending, but you don't think a Flag Day to commemorate events of 1967 could be seen as a little inflammatory as well?
Well, the commemoration of the events of 1967 is the unification of Jerusalem and the end of Jordanian occupation and the ethnic cleansing of the Jews from the eastern part of the city. The fact that this would be presented as some negative element by the reporter from Jerusalem is extraordinary.
Right.
But
will you allow that it's
that she left out of her report
Natasha,
the attacks on Jews in the old city of
Natasha,
Jerusalem.
This is incredibly, as you will be, you have to accept, while of course you are more than at liberty to raise your issues over reporting, for many Muslims, particularly young Muslims, to see people marching through what they believe to be their town is incredibly inflammatory.
Which is why the marches have been concentrated outside of Arab quarters, and why the police are taking extreme measures, especially this year, to curtail what are otherwise celebrations and a festival.
Why go through the Muslim quarter?
Well, that's not my decision.
No, of course, no. I'm so sorry. I didn't for a moment. Sorry, I didn't mean to reflect it was yours.
No, of course, but you have to appreciate that what it sounds like very much is that you are putting one festival above another.
No, not at all. And I absolutely want both faiths, indeed all faiths, to have because let's face it, Jerusalem is where all the faiths seem to meet, is it not?
And that is the delicate balancing act which the authorities in Jerusalem have become very practiced at dealing with. But the fact that this report would completely leave out attacks on Jews across the old city, that has been the real trigger of, as has been described, more radical groups coming to march on the streets. That is misreporting, and that is a crucial part of the story that your listeners are not being given the opportunity of.
Well, I'm grateful that you've put that in there. Lastly, do you think this year the march should be rerouted, should be suspended? What's your view, Natasha?
Nick, that suggestion sounds desperately like a situation of blackmail, and well, that would be
me to you personally?
Sorry?
Not me to you personally. You don't mean that, do you?
No, a situation of blackmail against the city authorities in Jerusalem.
Right.
To the extent that there is violence on the street, they must curb the religious festivals of other communities. Now, there is precedence for this, of course, because Jews don't have freedom of religion in Jerusalem. They are prevented from praying on the Temple Mount, which is a concession the Israeli authorities have made for peaceful coexistence. So there is a history of Israel and the Israeli authorities in Jerusalem bending over backwards in order to ensure that there is peace and that any tensions can be dispelled. But many people in Israel, understandably, would argue that cancelling Jerusalem Day, which is the most important day for the city of Jerusalem across the year for the Israeli community, and it's not just Jewish Israelis that celebrate it, there are many Arab Israelis that celebrate it also, right. It would indeed, in these circumstances, be giving in to blackmail.
All right. I think you can accept you've had it, and I'm really grateful for your input. You've been able to represent the other side of the coin, Natasha. Would you agree with that?
Well, it's a start, let's say that.
Okay. Well, for time reasons, I have to move on, Natasha.
Of course.
But I'm very, very grateful for your input. Let's hope that whatever is decided later today, the level of violence decreases from what we've witnessed over the last 3 days, which has really been rather extreme when you think about it. Okay, I know you want to talk about hugging Scott. Let's see if we can do you in the next hour, because that's when we're going to do it instead. So I hope you can hold, sir. If not, because that will allow me to do some of the many emails that have come in, and we will continue to talk about the Labour Party. But I'm now told, right, we can finally... good. So we've been hoping to get hold of the Suicide Prevention, Patient Safety and Mental Health Minister, and Conservative MP, obviously, Nadine Dorries, a little bit behind, so we're going to have to hold the news, I think, because the Minister is here to talk about £17 million to improve the mental health and well-being support in schools and colleges. Minister, thank you for coming on. Tell me, how will this money then be allocated? How would a school qualify for it? Good morning to you.
Morning. Morning, Nick. It's £17 million on top of £2.3 billion a year that we're putting in, on top of £500 million we were allocated a few weeks ago, on top of £8 million we allocated in September into schools for wellbeing return. And the money, this £17 million is going to 7,800 schools. It's going to support the training and development of mental health leads in those schools. But also, as part of that, as part of our long-term plan and our COVID recovery plan, we have mental health support teams in schools. 25% of schools we were hoping to have covered by 2023. That number has now been increased to 35%, partly due to the fact that many more people are now interested in working in mental health. And so we have more people available in the workforce to train. So we hope to have mental health support teams in schools identifying at a very early stage mental health problems as they arise in young children, because we know we have a much better chance then to stop it developing into something much worse. And that £17 million is also going to train mental health leads in schools across 7,800 schools. Those individuals will be linking with mental health support teams, with local authorities and local services to give children, those children that we know have been isolated from education, and those children that we know have had been adversely affected during the pandemic, to ensure that they have the support that they need.
And how big a crisis might we have in our schools and colleges, do you think, Minister?
So the signs are. I think it's really important to separate out mental well-being and mental health. Mental health for me is mental illness, and that's the really serious, big boys like schizophrenia and psychosis and the others. Mental well-being tends to be a transitionary phase that people with the right support and the right help can move through and come out the other side. And so we're there to ensure that those children who felt isolated or who've had problems during the pandemic have the support thing. Of course, we're anticipating a problem. We know about one particular problem. We know who has been affected during the pandemic. Young women particularly Eating disorders, we've seen an explosion of 22% increase this year in eating disorders alone. It has the highest mortality rate amongst all mental health illness. And so we're there to identify those problems in schools. And we know that's as a result of the pandemic.
A couple of other aspects while I have the benefit of you on the line. You might be aware that it's been reported that 3 in 4 care homes have staff who refuse to take the vaccination. That is obviously of great concern to those who have relatives in there, and presumably to you. What needs to be done in your view, Minister?
Well, I'm sure that's something that Helen Whately, who's the Minister for Care Homes and Social Care, is across and is discussing within the department at the moment. As a government, we don't have a policy to force people to be vaccinated.
Should you have?
Sorry?
Should there be a policy? Should it be mandatory? Unless you have overriding health concerns, obviously, and it was going to kill you, should you have the vaccination?
So that is, I'm sure, something which is under review and being discussed in the department. What I would say is that as we are moving out and easing out along the roadmap, and the Prime Minister is making an announcement this afternoon about that, we do have to exercise caution. We are leading the world in COVID recovery, and we want to nail this virus. We never want to be in the position that we've been in again. And as a government, we will be looking very carefully as we take each step out along the path to make sure we are never back there again. It's caution and it's optimism, but we need to be very careful moving forward. Would I force people to be vaccinated? You've asked me a very direct question. No, I wouldn't force people to be vaccinated.
Okay. We know there's some good news on the way later today from the Prime Minister. There's a possibility that there might be some additional good news. Is there something positive we don't know might be coming our way later today that you're aware of, Minister?
So, absolutely not, no. The Prime Minister has his press statement this afternoon, and as I've said, it's a mixture. The data's good, but it's a mixture of caution and optimism as we move out. We're in a great place, don't underestimate where we are. We have twice weekly lateral flow testing available to all. We have the capacity to surge test in local communities, door to door, where we see variants of concern arising. We're in a really good place to nail a virus. The important thing is that we don't blow it. We keep moving forward. We move forward with one eye behind our shoulder, checking the data, making sure that we keep everybody safe so we continue on this trajectory.
And just finally, we've not spoken since the considerable Conservative victory in Hartlepool. But some people have pointed, of course, to a tweet that you sent out prior to that, Minister, in which you suggested that Boris Johnson had created 180,000 well-paid jobs in Hartlepool, which is double the population, and you managed to misspell Hartlepool. Minister.
So, Nick, do you have that tweet in front of you?
I do. Boris Johnson has delivered hashtag Brexit, hashtag trade deals, and jobs for hashtag Hartlepool, which I imagine you mean Hartlepool, along with a hashtag Freeport and 180,000 well-paid jobs, hashtag Conservatives deliver we get stuff done, hashtag Hartlepool by-election. Minister.
So, as you can see...
You knew I'd have it, by the way, but do go ahead.
As you can see, the words Freeport and 180,000 jobs are linked together. There are 94,000 residents in Hartlepool, all of which can apply to work in those incredibly well-paid jobs in Teesside. I did not say there were 180,000 jobs in Hartlepool. I said Freeport.
You certainly didn't, because you called it Hartlepool, Minister. Now, had you done that at school, what would happen then?
Well, I'm not going to say I'm dyslexic, but I am. But what I literally did was put in the first 3 letters, HAR, and then just clicked on the hashtag that came up. It was an autocorrect. What can I say? In future, when I'm rushing, I won't depend on the... I'm an
old print journalist. My apologies. If I'd seen that written in a headline, I would have had stern words. But you're a minister, and I'm grateful. Nadine Dorries, I'm grateful for your time. Thank you for appearing here on LBC Where We Are. A little late to the news, 5 minutes after 8. Simon Conway.
On your radio, on Global Player, and...
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, Sir Keir Starmer says his top team has been refreshed and